Hey everyone, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com. I thought, since there was a few people asking about how I did this and were interested in the technique, I'd do a real rough and ready, totally low budget video on how to do a dovetail, with the disclaimer that I have no formal background in carpentry whatsoever. I watched a few people do it on YouTube, and people that actually know what they're doing. And this is just my very rough and ready adaptation of the technique, the principle of it all, using really basic tools and so on and so forth. The great thing about doing garden carpentry is that everything just has to function. It doesn't have to, I mean, that's all a matter of your personal taste, but it just has to work. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything like that. And here I am using, the cheapest wood there is, 1x3 spruce. At least in this part of the world, it's the cheapest. It's the most prevalent tree, one of the more prevalent trees in the northern boreal forest, and certainly the cheapest lumber you can get around here. So I just had the camera running when I did this one, so it's not very well filmed, and I apologize for that, but you can glean the basics of it, and there's better video content out there for sure on how to do this. I just can't think of the fellow, as a British guy that does, I'll put a link to his YouTube channel in the description box. For the life of me, I can't remember this fellow. Anyway, he uses a bunch of really nice tools. I'm using just totally cheap, crappy tools. So what am I doing here? I'm taking the piece of wood that's going to go and make the dovetail. I'm making sure that it's a bit wider than the opening. I think I used about 3/4 of an inch. So it's 3/4 of an inch wider on either side, and I'm just measuring where the shoulders are. I'm giving myself a very rough sense of how, where the inside edge is, and I'm drawing on the wood a picture of the dovetail. And a dovetail is just a joint that has this sort of, rhombus, I think, maybe, this sort of semi-triangle, rectangle-y, triangle-y, square type thing. Sorry if I'm sounding like an idiot here, I don't. It's not my background. You'll see the shape when I hold it up to the camera, but I'm just drawing what I want them to look. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. What matters is that the hole has to match the peg, right? You're going to make a dovetail, and you're going to make a slot. So I just drew. Neither of those are the same. That's why see how I marked on there right, left, so I know that goes on the right hand side and that goes on the left hand side, so I know that this one matches one side and that matches the other side. So anyway, I've drawn the dovetail, this sort of crooked rectangle type thing, and now I gotta cut them out of the ends of that cross member. I'm just using that same pruning saw, right? No $200 Veritas. If you got all that gear, that's great, and I wish I did too, but I actually do have a better handsaw than this. But this actually did a really good job. And I did another one of these windows using, so that's a silky, what's called a silky pocket boy. They're probably $50. I don't get any money from these guys or anything, and I had to buy these myself. I've contacted them, but they won't email me back. If you got a name with Silky, I'd gladly represent their stuff. I just think their stuff's great. Anyway, I got a slightly larger silky saw called a Gumboy, Gomboy. It's maybe 2 or 3 inches longer, and that one, holy smokes, that was just awesome. I mean, I might even prefer that to my actual carpentry saw for doing this kind of work. Anyway, this is not, ideally you want a good vise for doing this stuff, and you want proper implements. I don't have any of that. I don't have my garage isn't really set up for carpentry. It's set up for storing all the stuff my wife puts in it, and some of my fishing stuff. But it's mostly like Christmas stuff and other things like that. And I guess a bunch of basic tools. So Anyway, here I'm just cutting that. That's a dovetail. That's what they look like, because it looks like the tail of a dove. That sort of flared out look. Right, the beauty of the dovetail is that when you fit it into the hole you make for it, it really won't come out because it can't be pulled out just because of the shape of it. Right, it's wider at the end. It's such a simple, rudimentary, basic form of carpentry that predates the use of screws and nails. And when those things are really, really expensive and hard to come by, or you were traveling great distances, you didn't want to be carrying hundreds of pounds of nails or whatever. So joints would be done this way because it's just more, and there's a lot to be said for these sorts of joints because they swell up and they sorry, I'm blocking the camera there. I just had the camera set up and I just let it run. The footage was so poorly shot I didn't put it in the original video, but then since a couple people asked, that's what it looks like, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. See, neither of those are symmetrical or perfectly shaped. It doesn't matter for this sort of stuff. I mean, if you're trying to make something really pretty, if you're doing your kitchen cabinets or whatever, then you want to be a little more discerning. But what matters is that the hole matches the dovetail. That's what matters. And I mean, it has to match it well enough so that you can stick it in the hole without, pounding it too hard or breaking it, right? So it just has to fit. So earlier on I measured and found a center for that window. So I'm just lining those dovetails up with the middle point of the door. And now what I need to do is hold it in place very carefully without it moving. And good to have some sort of clamp or some help. Anyway, I just do the best I can here, but I'm just tracing that with a pencil. That's it. Just tracing it out like something you'd do in grade school, right? Now it's very important that you remember how you were holding this when you traced it, right? So you should mark which side goes to which, right? Put a 1 on the right hand side. You don't want to flip it upside down or whatever. You want to make sure that you put it back the way you measured it. Of course, as you can tell right there, I didn't do that. I just threw it on the floor. Awesome. But that's risky, right? You want it to go back in the way that you drew it to go in. So what I should have done was on the side I'm working on, I should have made some sort of mark on the part I'm holding there and a matching mark on the end that's supposed to go into that, so there's no confusion. This goes there with this side up, some sort of indication. So all I'm doing here is sawing out the marks I've made. But of course you can. You could probably cut the whole thing out if you have what's called a coping saw, but it's another tool, and I don't have that particular tool. So you don't need a coping saw. You just cut the lines that are perpendicular to the length of the board, and then what I'm going to do is pop that out using a chisel. And you don't even need a chisel, actually. I think I show here. I'm going to do it 2 different ways, and one way was no better than the other, to tell you the truth. So what I did, just for the sake of people that don't have a lot of nice gear, I use just a chisel and a knife. It's just a cheap $20 knife, and that chisel there is about as cheap a chisel as you can buy, but it's sharp, right? I've had that for years. I know how to sharpen chisels, it's not that difficult. But anyway, you don't need anything special, right? Get a chisel at a yard sale and put an edge on it. So you just find the line that you made. I wouldn't put the chisel right on the line because there's a grain in the wood. I would put the chisel on the inside of the line, because you never know which way the wood's going to go when you start pounding into it with a chisel. You can always pare it down after you've popped out the main piece. So, and be careful. This is probably not the safest way to handle something that's extremely sharp, what I'm doing right there. But if you've been watching my videos, I don't do anything. I tend to, when I'm not filming stuff, I tend to be a lot safer. It's just the nature of trying to get stuff done and not wanting to stop everything and trying to get everything done in one go. Anyway, so you might want to have some gloves on there. You might want to have it in some sort of vise instead of using your knees and your body to cradle it and so on. I mean, the one thing I did, I protected the chisel. I put a piece of wood underneath the wood I'm working on to keep the chisel from hitting the concrete, because that wouldn't be good at all. So on this side, I'm just going to use the knife, and I'm going to bring the camera in a bit closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. So just zoom that up a little bit, and I'm just trying to find a decent. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a decent camera angle to do that. And sorry if this video is a little bit long. I didn't want to rush anything. I don't want people to get a good. People that have never seen this before have no idea. So see how I'm moving the knife a little bit back from the line. It's not right on the line. It's a little bit in front of it. That way, if it splits in some weird way, it's not, you know, I can work with it, because most wood, especially really cheap junk wood like this, always has some sort of weird twisted grain. But as you can see, that knife did a perfectly fine job, and here I am just making it a little bit more perfect, trying to just clean it up so that the hole matches what I had drawn, and it's not it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but for this sort of work, as long as it goes in, as long as it fits, that's what matters. So then you just clean out any debris that's underneath it, and get your piece and try to fit it in. And you know, if you've got a file, you can use that. You know, just give it a little try. If it seems a little too snug, you can file it a little bit. But I think I had a good feeling there. I thought it was just about right. And if you were smart, if I was smart, I would have put a bit of glue on there, but I didn't. But you know, a joint like this out in the garden where there's moisture and stuff like that, it'll swell up and actually get a lot tighter. Don't hit it with a hammer. Put a piece of wood over it. And I should have zoomed the camera out to show the whole process. So what I'm doing is I'm tapping it a little bit on one side and tapping it a little bit on the other side. That way it doesn't all go, you know, off kilter sort of thing. So I'm just putting a piece of wood over that and hitting it with my fist. You could hit it with a mallet or whatever, but just trying to snug it in. But that's the gist of it, and that one worked out just fine. I'm probably going a little bit overboard, hitting that a bit too much. And really make sure that the ends where you're cutting your dovetails, so that piece that goes across the center, make sure that the ends of the wood that you're going to use to make those dovetails doesn't have any knots in it, right? You don't want to have knots in the dovetail, because it'll make it very brittle, and it's very likely to break when you're using it. So anyway, here just decided to speed this up a bit and show the process of putting that all together, and just you know, the finishing touches of getting that all together. So I think it's facing down right now, so one of the sides you're going to put a piece of wood, and that piece of wood is going to be, you know, on the long sides, that piece of wood is going to sit underneath the cross member that has the dovetail joints, and that gives it more strength, and you know, that'll also keep the dovetail from falling through, sort of thing. And that's going to be the back side, right? So there I am, just hammering that all in and attaching that, and so on and so forth. I think with this door or window, whatever you want to call it, I used nails for the most part. I had a whole bunch of these old drywall nails that I picked out of an old bucket of junk. So I drove those in. They're probably not as good as screws, and they probably won't work as well. But I mean, I don't know how long this thing is going to last. Maybe 10 years if I'm lucky. So that's fine. And there's a lot to be said for using something like that, like a drywall nail or any ungalvanized nail. For jobs like this, in certain regards, they're kind of handy, because the fact that it's not galvanized, it'll rust a little bit when it gets in contact with the moisture that's in the wood, and that rust will kind of glue it in or make it stick, if you know what I mean. The rust takes the smoothness out of the metal, and it's almost like it's been glued into the wood a lot better. In fact, that yellow knife that's you can see on the floor, that's how I drove that tang into the handle. I just drove the rat tail tang into a piece of birchwood, green birchwood, and it just rusted in. That knife, I think to put the handle on that knife, that yellow knife, took me 2 minutes, and it's been on there for about 5 years, and I use it for all kinds of things. So this is basically my go-to outdoors knife. Yeah, it's not the most rugged thing in the world, but man, for like just an old piece of metal I found somewhere, an old, it was an old blade off a knife that had broken years ago, and I just drove that into it. It worked out just fine. So here I am, just putting the finishing touches on the plastic. It might seem a bit odd that I'm using a hammer here, but I cannot find my good staple gun, so I was using this really wimpy one that doesn't seem to drive the staples into the wood properly. But that's just, it's kind of useful to show you that process, because you don't have to have the ideal tools to get a job done. If you're a gardener, you need good garden tools. You don't really need good carpentry tools. You need stuff that'll just get the job done. So any old staple, just borrow one from your neighbors or whatever. If it doesn't drive the staples right in, just tap them gently with a hammer. So the other door I use the nails and pieces of rubber, and this door I use a staple gun. Certainly in the initial stages, the staple gun, because it's just so nice to use, you can get a nice tight, really good job done. So you can tell when I flip this door over, the plastic's been stretched really well, and it's just very good, much better job than the initial door. That's just because it's easier to, that's why people use staple guns for work like this. It's easier to do in a lot of ways, but it'd be interesting to see how it holds up by comparison. Anyway, that's about it. I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some idea how to do that sort of thing. And if you enjoyed this content, like the video, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And until next time, get out there, get at it, and have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.